Well, it's Monday, and you know what that means. It's time for another updated 2021 NFL mock draft. Are you excited? Well, you should be. And you should smash that subscribe button if this is your first time checking out this video, or this channel, I should say, in general. And follow me on Twitter, because I've got a lot of NFL draft content coming up in the next 2.5 months or so. So yeah, you should definitely smash that subscribe button. You'll either enjoy what I do, or it'll give you something to complain and bitch about, which also could bring you, peace and calm and serenity into your life. And I don't care how I do it. If I can bring you just a little bit of happiness, whether you love me or you hate me, boy, that's great. So let's talk about this mock. Again, it's a one-round edition. All 32 picks of round one in the description box down below. You are certainly welcome to comment on what you see, give your opinions and such, etc. So let's talk about it. You got quarterbacks still going 1 and 2. I don't think that would be a massive surprise. You'd probably be more surprised at this point if I was mocking something other than a quarterback to the Jets at 2. Certainly is a possibility. I just don't think it is a probability. Relatively new general manager, new head coach, typically means new quarterback. I would certainly expect quarterback to go 1 and 2 in this draft. Where it starts to get interesting, and you could argue the draft really begins, is at number 3, because if you assume quarterbacks go 1 and 2, then you look to Miami in that third pick, and what do? Do they take the best offensive player? Do they potentially move on from Tua at this point in time when we get to the draft? Well, they have made a big trade for somebody like a Deshaun Watson. Unlikely, but who knows? Will they show some interest in quarterbacks just to get somebody to potentially move up and try to get to their spot and accumulate additional draft pick capital? I certainly think that should be an appealing option for the Dolphins there at 3. Like if Carolina is going to be really desperate for a quarterback, let's say, or somebody along those lines, like you could get a decent price back in return by even moving down from 8 to 3 or 3 to 8. You could certainly do that, especially if it's a quarterback. You get Carolina desperate enough, you could extort like a second-round pick, not only the 8th, but a second-round pick this year. And you probably could force a 2022 first-round pick out of them, too, if they're desperate enough. So I think there are certainly all types of possibilities that are open, but assuming Miami stays with the pick, I'm not assuming any trades at this point in time. I think it'll be an offensive player. Could go offensive line here. Certainly need to do a better job of protecting Tua. But Ja'Marr Chase, I would imagine, would be hard to pass on here. The one thing I wonder is if because of the depth of the talent at the wide receiver class, if some of these wide receivers that we assume will be in the top 10 potentially drop out of the top 10, and then you see a big run on them between 10 and 25, that certainly could happen. But I think here, like Miami, they'd have to feel like this is a pretty low regrets move to take a big playmaker like Chase at number 3. Number 4 in Atlanta, here's what I'm trying to figure out about the tight end from Florida. Like, is a guy like him at a position like that, is he really worth a top 5 pick or even a top 10 pick? And I harken back to a guy like TJ Hawkinson a couple of years ago. He had a lot of hype around him. He was a great all-around guy in terms of a talent at the tight end position. Got up a little bit in the, hey, George Kittle came from that same school, had a similar skill set. George Kittle was a massive steal for the 49ers in the 5th round of that draft. So a couple of years later, here's Hawkinson, and now he moves up because you see other teams, getting great value out of the tight end position, seeing the importance of the tight end position in other teams' passing games. But you have to wonder, like, how much do you really want to spend on a guy that, in terms of a draft pick, that even if he's outstanding, he's likely at best going to have 1,000 or 1,100 receiving yards? Like, how much is that really worth? You know what I mean? Like, if you're looking at a guy like a Ja'Marr Chase or a Jaylen Waddle, or maybe you're even looking at like a Devonta Smith, and you're looking at offensive skill players, you're saying to yourself, okay, I project that this guy at his best could be a 1,500 yard receiver. 10 plus touchdowns. Is a guy like Pitts really going to be that level of talent? Like, I will say, if you think he's going to be a more explosive version of Travis Kelce as a pass catcher, then yeah, maybe you do. Because Kelce can go for 1,200, 1,300 yards But it's all about positional value and so forth. But I do think it's interesting, especially for the Falcons, because, while I think they should certainly strongly consider a quarterback here, because you got a new head coach in Arthur Smith, a new general manager, you need to be building for the future. There's also the problem of, this is a team that's up against it in terms of the salary cap, and do you really want to double down and tie a bunch more cap money up into the quarterback position where you're probably tied to Matt Ryan for at least a couple of more seasons? Might not be the best allocation of resources, even though it might be best for the long-term health and stability of the organization. When I look at teams like Cincinnati and Philadelphia, I think offensive line is a critical need for both of those teams, but it shouldn't preclude them from taking a wide receiver if they feel that wide receiver provides better value. But here I've got Slater going 5 and Sewell going 6. Could flip it just as easily. But, you look at both teams, assuming Burrow is back and healthy in 2021, everybody knows you got to protect him. They could argue you could also protect him by giving him an explosive weapon on the outside. But, the Super Bowl showed you could have Mahomes and Hill and Kelsey and struggle if your offensive line can't hold up. So makes sense for Cincinnati to invest to protect Burrow. And then you look at Philly, assuming that Jalen Hurts will be the guy. You want to protect a young quarterback, an offensive line that dealt with its share of injuries and missed games out of starters last year was a big reason for the offensive struggles. It wasn't just that Carson Wentz regressed mightily. He certainly did, but it was not entirely or solely on him either, as it typically isn't for a quarterback. So looking at those two teams, it makes a lot of sense. Now, Detroit, you could make an argument for offensive line. You could certainly make an argument for a quarterback here. Just because you traded for Jared Goff doesn't mean that you can't take a guy that you really like here at number 7, and I certainly think that's a possibility. But assuming they actually buy into and believe what they've said publicly, which you look at who their general manager is and the fact he came from the Rams, and he was apparently a guy that was pounding the table for Goff, he might be a believer in him. Then it makes sense that you got to get him some help, because regardless of whether you retain Kenny Golladay or not in free agency, whether you franchise tag him, give him a long-term deal, or you let him walk no matter what, I'd assume that they wouldn't. I would assume that they would keep him. Even if you do, then you just got Golladay, Hockenson at tight end. You need another wide receiver. If you want to get the most out of Goff, you're going to have to do that by giving him weapons similar to what the Rams did when you had Cooks and Kupp and Woods. He had a variety of weapons that he could throw to in that passing game. Can't bring Goff in and then expect him to play well with a lower level of talent around him. It's just not going to work. Carolina, I think everybody assumes that they don't make a move for somebody else's retread or veteran quarterback, that they're going to be very big in on a young quarterback here. It's probably either Fields or Lance. Feels like the guy that would be right for them. I'm not sure which one you'd rather have if you're Carolina. I might lean towards Lance a little bit, but I might lean towards Fields a little bit. You guys let me know, if you were in Carolina's shoes, which quarterback would you rather have? But then you're probably looking and you're saying, man, you've got Trey Lance falling all the way down to number 20. Admittedly, that's just me dreaming. But I always trying to play it out like I'm trying to hedge the bets a little bit here. You've got so many people assuming that 5 quarterbacks will go, let's say, in the top 12 or in the top 15. And that seems incredibly unlikely based off of history. Certainly not impossible. And this year could be different. But one of these guys could potentially fall. And if it is, trying to target who it could potentially be. Lance, yes, he has the most upside, which you could have argued last year with Jordan Love. He had the most physical upside. But you look at Trey Lance, he also has lower level of competition playing at North Dakota State. And the fact that he only played, one game this past year? So teams are going to have to go back to 2019 film for a guy from a smaller school. There's a possibility that he could drop a little bit. So, I will say this. If he got to around past New England, the Bears had desperately better be trying to trade up to where Arizona or the Raiders are to go get him. Hell, I would even say where Arizona is, because you don't want to take the risk that the Raiders might want him to prepare for life after Derek Carr. You will also see that offensive line is a very heavy trend here in this draft, because this offensive line class is really, really good. I'm not sure how Cowboys fans will feel about me projecting a Vera-Tucker to them at 10. They're probably looking at a corner or some type of defensive lineman, edge rusher type of guy. But the reality is that if you bring back Dak, which is a question, but it's an assumption for the moment that Dak is back. You've also got a lot of money invested in Zeke. One of your big problems on the offense outside of Dak going down early in the year was all the injuries you had in the offensive line, how many games you didn't get out of your high-paid starters. That unit's taken a big step back in the past couple of years. So if you want to be at your true best, you're going to have to get better on that offensive line. So I don't think taking a guy like Vera-Tucker would be the worst thing in the world. There's some type of offensive lineman there at 10. Maybe you could trade down a little bit, perhaps. If you're a 49ers fan, you might be surprised with me projecting them not to take a quarterback here. I don't know. They might still be sold idiotically on Jimmy Garoppolo. Because if they weren't, they would have likely moved on from him when they had the chance to move on from him and save a ton of money under the salary cap to do so. That's the way I think of it. So they got to really be a believer in him. For what reason? I do not know why, because Jimmy Glass is ass. I'm sorry. But anyways, I'm going to wrap this up now. Tell you guys you feel free to comment. If you enjoyed this and it's your first time checking me out, smash that subscribe button. If you didn't and you hate my guts and you hate who I have mocked for your team, still go ahead and smash that subscribe button. I'm sure plenty of Falcons fans are going to rant and rave at me for having Pitts going number 4 to them. Well, you know what? We've had our fun over the years when it comes to me mocking picks for your team, isn't it? Yeah, might as well keep the tradition alive. I'm out of here.